or is there, just how people are approaching this? But you say nothing really.
Yeah, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. I took my group bowling on Friday night. I said, look, there'll only be, usually there's 6 in a lane. I said there'd only be 4 in a lane so they can socially distance. We're supposed to have a whole lane between us and the next group. The rest of the people in the bowling alley weren't social distancing at all. And then 2 of our lanes had broken down, so we all got squashed together anyway. The bowling alley didn't care. I don't know what the count was, but it was packed. They're supposed to be 100, but yeah. And then
where are you?
I'm in Dunedin. And then we went to dance competitions in Waimate. And again, like honestly, I stood beside women who I wouldn't be able to tell you who they were. I was standing like right beside them. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. To be fair, social distancing stopped the moment you put someone else's shoes on. So
yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the first questions you need to ask is with shutting down, opening up, and I think that's going to be our future here in New Zealand. We got to acknowledge that that's what's going to happen. What are you going to not lose? What are you going to make sure you're going to be able to maintain, whether you go online or you're in face-to-face in person? So I think we have to ask those questions first as a staff team, with your volunteers, however you do that. The other issue I think we need to really address is, and this is the talk that's going on globally, and it used to be online's here to stay, online's here to stay. We need to think hybrid, and churches that have resourcing are thinking hybrid now. There's always going to be something online, and there's always going to be something in person. And they're going to figure out, how do you make that work together all the time? So that at any moment you can just put more emphasis in one or the other, depending on the lockdown level. But nothing has to stop, and nothing has to be recreated again. And so are you thinking along these lines? Are we in New Zealand, where I don't think before we were, but now that we just experienced that a whole region can be shut down again, are you thinking along the lines of how to make your youth ministry a hybrid mix of online and in person?
Yeah.
Because I think once you get past that question, we need to talk about what's that really mean. Because I think just doing everything as a video doesn't quite cut it. And that's what churches are finding now. Numbers are dropping, watcherships dropping overseas everywhere. Things are dropping down on metrics on how to measure whether it's making a difference. So now the talk is changing around what hybrid is. So how are we doing? How are your churches placed to go hybrid in your youth ministries?
Yeah, we're all set up, ready to go. So we're looking at 2021 now already. So we've got our plan for the rest of the year. It's pretty scrappy. We're just going to put it in the bin and then look to the next year. But we're factoring in, half of every term will be in and out of lockdown levels. So for what that looks like in our context of, we have on average 200 teenagers turning up. So anything, if we go below level 3, I think it is, or whatever the levels are, as soon as it goes below 100, we have to go back into small groups and homes. But then our small groups and homes go from 10 to 30 to 40. Mm-hmm. And so then we have to look at how we scale that down again. So that's going to be different for some of the churches who just have, that 10 to 40 range. So what we're doing is we're planning for half the term to be done in homes, which means that the pastors or the pastor isn't able to be there. So we need to really upskill the leaders. So the leaders need to be not just there to lend a hand on a youth group night, but they need to be able to lead independently on a youth group night and do discipleship and prayer and the crying on the shoulder and all the stuff that we would normally do, because we're just not, it's surprising that teenagers over summer don't have any problems, and most of the problems they have occur on youth group nights. It's funny how that's a great coincidence, and Friday night they don't seem to have any problems at all. But because when their problems are happening, we're not around, we're not the ones who can respond to them. So we're now looking to train leaders far more thoroughly and actually produce physical documents to supplement what the small groups are doing in homes. And so we're looking at making, this size booklet, one for each term, as well as new Christian documents, how to baptize, how to do mission, and all this kind of stuff. So we're actually going to make 4 study lessons that go over 10 weeks. So if we do the first 3 weeks as a big group, great. And then if the next 7 weeks are in lockdown or in small groups and homes, the lesson continues. So our first goal of preaching Christ gets met, and our second goal of, like, I think I just talked to Simon about this earlier, fellowship and what we're doing, that falls in. And then where we can, we'll do mission and evangelism. We'll keep going down the road that way. So we're actually booking in small group times at home. We're actually anticipating it for the whole of next year.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. That's kind of our hybrid, and less stuff online, but more just recap, more kind of overview, more kind of, this is what's coming up, refer to the book, that kind of stuff. More testimony, but less kind of my face on a screen just blasting away like I'm doing now, because people switch off.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Dan, how do you ensure, like, because this was a question that was asked to me, because I suggested small groups at home, and I was said, but how can you make sure that there's social distancing when they're at home, if they're in a home?
Yeah, you can't. So I've gone out and bought masks for everyone, several masks. I think we've got like 1,000 masks. I've got 50-something bottles of hand sanitizer. And I've said to all the groups, tell me where you're meeting, and when you're meeting, I'll come and drop them off. We've got 18 small groups. COVID. Like 2 of them picked up masks and hand sanitizers. We've got one parent who wrote me a vicious email. Hey, the kids aren't social distancing. And I'm like, well, if you're a parent, don't send your kid if you're that concerned about it. But they're doing it at school, and they're climbing on each other at school.
Yeah.
So, like what Brian said before, we can't be like schools in what we're teaching and content, but the school playground, I mean, it's the same kids anyway. They're not really, there's no Auckland kids coming down to Tauranga for youth group night and then going back. It's just the same kids that they saw last week or in the rugby field.
Yeah.
Now, if we go down even tighter, then we put on hard restrictions, and then we physically separate people by 2 meters. But at the moment, and I've gone to GPs. We've got GPs in our congregation. I've sought their advice on this. We shouldn't need to worry. And speaking out of turn, with something I know nothing about, South Island, I don't think has any cases.
No.
So if you're in the South Island, I would be just doing your life as normal. Yeah.
It was our GP head of elders' wife that said that to me, though.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we get them, but we got to be. I think you got to be. It's my dog. Yeah, just got to be smart about it. I mean, look, if there is a risk, if COVID was in our community, let's keep away. I'm not doing anything at homes. We're gonna my face will come back online. We'll do something to keep them during that time. But where we can, teenagers stacking up on top of each other. Yeah. Good, like a good teenage stacks.
That's great, Dan. You're quite well resourced, obviously. I'm interested in how churches do this, looking at this hybrid model, particularly around content. If you're smaller, what are people's thoughts on that? I mean, I've got some ideas, but I want to hear from you guys.
Have you thought about it, or are you kind of just letting it ride until you have to?
I guess it's something that you continually think about. Kind of can't really not. I guess the idea, especially of a smaller church like mine, pretty much most of my youth group can almost fit into the group of 10. So,
Sure.
But the idea of it is like how to maintain contact with those who no longer want contact. Like I've got quite a high percentage of Asians in our congregation, and their difference in anxiety levels is a lot higher than other churches and other groups. And so how do you cater towards that? How do you kind of encourage kind of the distancing and prioritize kind of the restrictions and the kind of the parental concerns But at the same time, how do you actually kind of connect with your young people who are not connecting over social norms?
Right.
And so it's kind of like a new field of how do we connect without the technology. The technology is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a drive towards how to go back into old school connection, but doing it in a safe way that goes within the restrictions. We can still have the accessibility of driving. We still have the accessibility of being able to knock on someone's door, but we do it in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier said than done. It's old school kind of youth work style stuff. But at the same time, it's kind of like having to re-explore that. I mean, we don't have the technology to be able to do too much with our youth group, nor do many of our youth groups show up on Zoom anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So so this lockdown, so like last lockdown, we probably had about 15 to 20 kind of showing up on a regular basis. This lockdown, last Sunday, I had 4.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just the expectations. Probably if we did Zoom again this week, there'd be less or the same about. And so it's kind of one of those things where our young people's mind frames have changed as well.
Right.
So how do you kind of maintain that within it?
Because I think our challenge is technology, Zoom, the way they do schools. We lean into do online content. It's almost says it almost makes you feel guilty if you don't. But that's not the purpose of the church. We don't teach young people about Jesus. We guide them to know Jesus. Our job is to help people learn to love Jesus, love each other, and love their neighbor. We're a transforming community joining God's kingdom mission. So we can't treat this as discipleship has never been about teaching alone. That's part of it. So the smaller churches that are feeling the struggle because you don't have big video teams and technology teams and a lot of teaching pastors, whatever. The question Alan's asking is the right one. How do you provide the right amount of content without it taking all your time? Because your main focus is actually the people. Because the other reality is teens do face-to-face a whole lot better than Zoom. And so we have to figure out how we're going to do face-to-face personal walking alongside each other during different levels of lockdown. So those of us that don't have large research teams, how are you handling the content issue? Because I'm very aware some are doing nothing. It's too hard.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'm currently curating resources, so plug and play type stuff. Enough copies so that okay, what's easier? Teaching a leader how to do a small group ministry really well in their own home for the first time, maybe, or in someone else's home. It's quite a unique mix of skills. You got like being able to teach well, create good content, lead a small group, which requires very strong direction, but also a very relational approach to getting people on task. Able to intuit pastoral care needs. So someone asks a head question, but they actually want a heart answer. You know, those kind of all at once. I know pastors that can't do that, let alone youth leaders. So what's better is having some curated content that's, whether it's videos you can watch in person or small group studies, whatever it is, that we can do both all together in smaller groups or by ourselves. So it keeps those 3 structures linked. So I'm just stockpiling those and ready to roll them out next time we go into groups of 10 or less. My other priority, I've been meeting with parents while we can in level 1, getting to know them. I'm just new here, but by going youth ministry is at its best. I've seen the youth who get the most out of youth group are the ones whose parents are brought into church. Whether or not they're born into youth group, they're just brought into church. And so I'm asking them questions about youth ministry. I'm flashing some lights about what youth ministry could be and should be, how they can link with me. It turns out those same parents are now really keen to open up their homes to small groups, which is cool. But it's just this linking thing of I can't be, if we go to level 3 or even 4, I can't be present to do pastoral care face to face. A phone call, Zoom, text, whatever, doesn't quite cut it. The best person is a really onto it parent. Like parents in youth leaders are separate, they provide separate needs to young people. But if we can have some really onto it parents, every youth in their own home has a better chance of connecting. If their parents are reminding them, hey, isn't there a youth group tonight? Isn't there a resource? Can I help? Can I pray with you through this booklet? I'll watch the video with you, whatever it is. Those would be the best things that scale down to level 4. And then, so I'm sort of phrasing it as, if it's not in person, it's got relational capital. It's costing. Every time we do something online, it's taking away. It costs us. It's a relationship. So when we're in person, we want to stockpile relationship. Lots of fun things. I'm trying to plan a camp at the minute because Extend was cancelled. Hopefully we stay in level 2 so we can do that as a church. That really builds relationships, so that I miss that person who I know, whether it's me or a leader or a peer, so that when they're by themselves, they're internally motivated to connect. That's sort of my approach. Content, fantastic. I could send out a verse a day from Bible Gateway, and they may or may not read it, let alone a Bible study. So it's about relationship. Internal motivation will lead to engagement in the content. So the good content, I'll find that from Noah's Alpha, Gate, Follow, whatever it is. But it's the connections. They'll be. Yeah.
Andy, you said 2 things here. One of it mirrored what Dan said. I think it's really important. One is you're picking up the future youth ministry is going to involve parents. Parents are afraid. They don't like that they're not wearing a mask. They're going to start bringing their kids to Sunday church and not send them to youth ministry if youth ministry doesn't feel safe. Parents are going to be involved now. They're going to be protective. So I think the more you can do with parents, the better. Informing them, involving them, including them in certain kind of program events, super important for the future. Also, the other thing you said, Andy, is we got to remember who we're dealing with. We're dealing with teenagers. So content is not as important as connection. You're absolutely right. So you put your best energy and you figure out how to have relational time together, regardless of the levels. And if anything online or in person takes away from relationship building, then you reconsider the amount of energy you put into it. So if you're not a natural communicator and you can't just pop up, open a passage and go for it, and you find that you got to really SWOT and study and prepare, maybe that's not the best way for you to use your ministry right now and your time. And it's better to go find right now media videos. And YouTube is full of fantastic youth pastors from all around the world doing great services and sermon series. You use that, and then you have your small groups meet around discussion around that. There's ways to do that where, because the reality is the teens don't remember the content. They remember the FaceTime. They remember the Coke at McDonald's. They remember you being at the game. They remember that stuff. And it's the season. That's what we're called to. So our discipleship includes teaching, but it's lots of different ways to teach. And so we need to get our head around where the past is usually, and the bigger you get, the more the challenge, Dan. The bigger you get, it's a whole lot, you feel more, it's more pressure to put on big content, really good content. I get that. I was part of a big church too. And so how do you make sure the relational happens, which is why you're putting time in small group leaders. Perfect. So I'm going to share the page again. Let me just talk through this, and then I want you guys to kind of apply it to yourself and how you would do this. Sharing the screen one more time. Okay, so based on this, if my main thing is making disciples who make disciples, that's my whole goal for youth ministry. How am I going to help teenagers follow Jesus for life in such a way that they can bring their friends on board and show them how to follow Jesus for life? This is how I would do this so that my ministry never stopped regardless of the level of contact. So there'd be discipleship. So you got this discipleship box here. That includes small groups would always be happening. Prayer groups will always be happening. I make sure that all the teens are experimenting and trying different spiritual practices. That can happen online or in person all the time. And that's always, always there. And then based on my resourcing, when it comes to content, I'll either I would create YouTube-like teaching, right? So you're talking, you have pop icons popping up on the screen up here where they can see different kind of, I don't know, illustrations and whatnot. But do the popular YouTubers, which is what all the teams are watching now, teach in that kind of modality if you have resources to do that. If not, just use other people's resources, just what we've been talking about, and gather small groups around that. We're going to watch this series on this Wednesday night. We're watching this episode, and then we're going to talk about it. But that I can do online or in person. That'll never stop. Teens connect with face-to-face, so I'd always make sure there's face-to-face happening all the time, always in-person stuff based on the level of alert. So based on level of alert, visitation, I think Jethro, you were talking about going old school visitation, massive deal now. In a world that's forgetting how to knock on each other's doors, COVID, where you're supposed to say socially distance, is actually crying out for people to knock on each other's doors. So based on the level of alert, I would take a camping chair and I would sit at the end of the driveway and talk to them across their front yard. And I would do visits with everybody. And that means not just the teen, but also their parents at the same time if it's in lockdown. If it's not in lockdown or different levels, I would find other venues to make it happen. Outside venues are getting really popular in the States. And they're having church outside because they can be socially distanced. They can still do large events and church services, but it's all outside, fresh air, all that kind of stuff. So pick appropriate size meetings and hospitality based on the level alert. But I would make sure face-to-face never, ever stopped. Even level 4, you can still sit at the end of the driveway and talk to your neighbor on level 4. Wear a mask, do that. You're in your local area, you're all good. Evangelism testimony, I would make sure evangelism and getting stories about people following Jesus never stopped, regardless. And this is where we have found over lockdown, just through our own Zoom meetings here, that the best stuff is when the kids, the teens, are putting their own testimony story on Instagram. So I would make that a regular part of my youth ministry all the time, whether it's level 1, no level, level 4, it would never stop. I would do Q&A shows where people can call in to Zoom. This is kind of what Dan was doing with adult leaders. I would do it with teens and do a Q&A thing. People can call in on Zoom and ask any question they want. Figure out how to do it, but it's all around where's God in this, that kind of deal. But stories and testimonies, I would make sure our church website, my youth ministry website, always had a tab on it that had people telling their stories. Because every non-Christian is asking, do I want to be like them? Then they ask about, do I want to follow Jesus? So have stories online. But that happens all the time. The other thing I would always do, teens, you got to have fun. I would always make sure there's fun going on. But the other thing we learned from each other over at our first lockdown, stuff that's done by students is always more popular than stuff that's done by us. So whatever social event I'm doing, whether it's online or in person, I would have students lead it, host it, develop it. This is part of my leadership development of teens, but they have better ideas than I do. I'm in my 50s. I wouldn't come up with a very good social plan. They would. So I would make sure teens are a big part of that, and staff and volunteers and paid people take a step back and they coach and lead and help them succeed. But then the last part is huge. And there's been some of the prophetic voices like your Mike Frost and stuff that have been posting about this, that during lockdown and COVID, and other countries have it worse than we do, churches have done the opposite of what church history has proven churches have always done. In times of plague, Christians run in. In times of fear, Christians run into those who are in need. This is the first time in church history, so they say, that churches have been taking a step back and being part of the fear-mongering and conspiracy theorists and not rushing in. I would lift the level of service and community within my youth ministry. What's going to get these teens trusting Jesus and seeing Jesus, experiencing Jesus, because I can't do the big emotive worship services anymore, is always make service and community a massive part of my ministry. And I would make sure they always did it with their parents. There would be a single service project that wasn't done with their parents in this COVID climate because of fear factor stuff. But serve those in the church, find people that are in need in your own neighborhood and ask people from your church to come into your neighborhood and help them out, figure out safe ways to serve the elderly. But that would be a massive part of what I would do. And then what that creates is, if I was doing all that, it creates opportunities for people to invite their friends to just watch and experience it, to come and serve alongside, which non-Christians in New Zealand jump on those opportunities, to play and have some fun, and then eventually to join. But I can make sure that all those aspects never stopped, whether it's in person or online, it's always going. To the point where massive content dumping, I would probably change from in-person stuff to online around small groups. Do the online teacher small groups talk about it. And the base youth services and all that can just come and go as they are allowed. So what are we thinking? Do you see what I'm doing here? How does this apply to your ministry? What does this make you want to do for your own youth ministry? Because this isn't a template for everyone's youth ministry. This is just what I would do. But how would you apply this type of thinking to your youth ministry?
Oh, we're really small, and we're in this weird position where we don't have many older teenagers in our youth group at all. We've got like a big group of 12 to 14-year-olds. That's us. Like, well, when I say big, not even big, like I'm doing 15 kids, you know, like, but we've got like hardly any older ones at all, like 3 kids who are like 15, and then nobody above that. No one, no 17, 18, 19, none of them, 0, huge gap. So for us, I see what you're saying, and I think it's all fantastic, but I wish, I'd really love if we could access some testimonies and stories from some of your youth groups. Like everyone, like I wish there was like maybe there is and I don't know about it, but is there some way that like we could share story? Like would there be teenagers who'd be happy to share their testimony with other churches? Like, because I would really appreciate that for my small group. Like, because we don't have those teenagers in our own youth group, the older ones, to feed down into the younger ones.
Yeah. And Emma, great point. I mean, you're just setting off my idea meter, because some churches have those on their websites. You can find out, they could share YouTube channels to you, but you could also contact any youth pastor, I bet, and ask, is there a team that'd be willing to zoom into our small group and do a little kind of interview? We talk with that team live. And talk with them. Why do you follow Jesus? What's, you know, ask whatever question you want.
Yeah, that would be amazing for us. That would be really cool.
I wish our smaller youth ministry leaders like yourself would do more tapping on the shoulder of others that have a larger resource pool and use that. I did it when every youth ministry I led, I started off with like 5 to 3 kids. And you got to tap into other larger churches for a period of time. So that's brilliant thinking.
Does anyone have any testimonies now that a video that could just resource bank into BYM? Yeah, Dan does. Does anyone else? And Jordan, thank you. If you could ask those young people and see whether they're prepared to share them, and then put them in onto our website.
They're our intellectual property, so we can distribute under copyright. It's fine as long as we get the right accreditation.
Is there a place for, like, I mean, BYM website is totally being redone because it sucks, but is there a possibility of we have a channel on that is teen testimonies?
That would be amazing.
And people can just load it on there. It's got their church logo and stuff on it, but people can just go and listen to teenagers talk about why they follow Jesus.
What if there was a BYM Instagram or Facebook and we sent you the videos and you upload, you know, you sift through them and this one's trash, this one's good.
Yeah.
And you put them up, you know, make a schedule. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there is a new video that goes up at a certain time. There's actually a program you can use that will post for you at a certain time. So you can actually schedule it in. You know what it's called, Jamie?
What?
The Instagram post later.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's cool. It could even be called post later. We use it down here. And it actually means you can actually upload from your computer to Instagram, not through your phone. And yeah, so we can all just start videoing testimonies. You can start shoulder tapping people, Brian, and send out an email. So look, Simon, I need 3 from you this week. Sarah, I need 6 from you this week. You know, Andy, I need 2 more from you this week. And we just start putting them out, and you can,
Seems very worthwhile. If it helps other churches get the idea to do their own, then too, that's a win. It'd be great.
Yeah.
It would help a lot of churches who don't have a lot of leaders, like because I'm like one, you know, I've got one leader who volunteers on a Sunday morning, and one other leader that can come and help me on the social events. But apart from that, it's just me. So if I can get anyone else's input, or you know, it just widens the pool of voices that they're hearing. You know, like it's not just me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, Emma, use the BYM Facebook page, use the Aaron, use the Youth Collective Facebook group, and then email us here at BYM anytime you need other additional support and help. And we just put the word out. There's lots of youth pastors that will share their stuff and their people.
That would be great.
That'd be great.
Because actually, Brian, you could get Blue, Alan, all those guys. They can start doing some as well. You know, make the whole BYM Instagram thing a
thing.
Place where people come and they can, you know, everyone can sit there on their phones. They're doing it anyway. In the house, watch this talk. You know, Alan, whoever talking about whatever, and it could become quite a place to get a particular type of testimony. Maybe even go further, worship. You know, we come back from our Ruatoria missions trip. We got a 3-minute video. All right, this is what mission looks like. People can talk about that.
Exactly.
Someone's out feeding the community. They video that. They put it up. I think the key would be that there's a regularity to it. So we know that every Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever night it is, there's something there. And, you know, with all the churches and youth groups up in the country, you should have a plethora of, content.
Yeah. I think we stockpile about 10. We started. I think people will start following through. That'd be great.
So there's a bunch on if you go to Bethlehem Baptist Youth Facebook page, I think it's just called Bethlehem Baptist Youth Day.
Oh.
Yeah. You can go there. You can see all of ours is already there.
Is it public?
Yeah. It's a page, not a group. So it's a page. Yeah. So I think it's public. You can take it. We've probably got the master ones we can send you as well. So anything you want in the meantime, there's a whole bunch of stuff there we did from last lockdown.
Yeah. Because Jordan, you have a few too, right? Because you kind of highlighted this the first lockdown, how important it was for teens to share their stories. There's no sound.
We can sign.
That's why he's been quiet this whole time.
Yeah, he goes, I've been trying to say stuff for the last hour.
Yeah.
Have you been talking? Oh, we didn't know.
I was like, Jordan's so humble. Like he's just.
There's just no mic. There's no mic, mate, and you're not muted. All right, just nod. Yes, he did a good job with this during lockdown. Any other thoughts? And just looking at the long-term issues.
Well, I've got to shoot in a few minutes, but those booklets that I talked about before, we're actually making them in such a way that we can actually send them out as PDFs and people can print them and use them themselves. And we'll be printing excess ones that we can actually just post off to people if they need them. So we're actually, by the end of this year, we should have, 4 terms worth of 10 weeks programs. What am I saying?
Curriculum. It's kind of a
curriculum. So there'll be like a 10-week program in a booklet that we can actually send out. It doesn't have our logo on it. You can actually add your logo to it.
Yeah.
We've got a graphic designer they're going to be color schemed, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to have the same type of booklet for new Christians, welcome to church, baptism, mission. So kind of 4 phases. Because I get all the relational stuff, and the older Andrew Root stuff I was a big believer in, but I think for me the framework is really important, that we're doing this for Christ, in Christ, by Christ. That's the old Gleaning Baptist. that's their vision statement. But all the relationship stuff has to be done within a firm Christological framework. Otherwise it just tends to go into just buddiness, or I'm a friend, and I've seen it kind of wind down. So I'm leaning back the other way.
Dan, let's name it. Most people that push relational youth ministry and talk about it in today's world, in our Baptist churches, it's purely hanging out.
Yeah.
It is that. So
Yeah.
I think we got to acknowledge that. That's why for me, the mission is to make disciples. So every time you hang out, you're hanging out for the purpose of take another step closer in following Jesus, become like. So content's super important, but if you don't have the resources to crank out full curriculum like you're doing, we got to give ourselves permission to use other people's stuff and stop playing the game. Well, it's not from New Zealand. Just tweak it, use it, talk. That could be the discussion that they want to have as they just watch the YouTube clip or whatever.
Yeah.
But face-to-face time, figure out how that doesn't stop regardless of lockdown level.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? And then how do you take the pressure off to provide just the online stuff you need to have, and then empower students to do as much as possible? I think those are the three things we have learned through the last lockdown that tended to get lost, the second one.
Yep.
So key on those areas. And I'm sorry, we got to plan for this happening through 2021.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think another principle needs to be we need to plan for change, for fluidity, that we are going to be planning a camp or whatever, and it may not happen. We just got to be flexible on that, and how we lead into that, both with our leaders and our young people, is quite important. That that nothing is fixed, and sure we can be disappointed, but it's not going to take us down a bad track because it's not our fault. It's going to happen.
That's right. And the youth ministries that will survive this, and to be real crass, the youth pastor leaders who will keep their jobs at the end of this are the ones that pivot and are ready to pivot when you get the announcement the night before that things have stopped, and are the ones that have provided FaceTime. People that are getting some kind of FaceTime contact, personal contact, they will come back.
Yeah.
You lean just on them watching stuff, they're not going to come back.
Quick question. So just picking up on Alan said about, camps and stuff, they might get cancelled and etc. So I'm about to start booking in Fiji 2021. Now, who thinks it's actually going to happen? July,
Nobody.
Are we going to go to Fiji or are we not? Like
every mission agency is saying, forget it.
Yeah, but for me, I still want the poster up. I still want to tell kids that we're passionate about mission. I still want to actually sign up 10, 20, 30, 50 kids to go on this thing. And I want to go through all the pre-mission steps, even if it's the day or whatever, it's got to be a go, no-go day. Even if we get up to that day and say we can't do it, I still think it's a worthwhile venture to do that. And it could be the same with camp prep. It could be the same with event prep, all this kind of stuff, because for me, a lot of the real groundwork in teaching Christ happens in that lead up. So it's actually a question I want to ask is, do you think I'm actually right in my thinking there? Is it right to aim for something and head towards it with a less than 50-50 shot of actually coming out? Or is that actually going to be more damaging to miss out on, key events? So,
I think people, you go, Brian.
No, I'm saying, what do you think? Just opening it up.
I can't speak to your context, but for me, I've got youth that are like really bummed about Easter camp. Like it sucked for them. Some went on a bus tour, a Wellington-based thing. Extenders cancelled. QB, and it's like, there's my mountain. I need. So someone said to me, I need that to have faith. I'm like, oh, that's not fantastic, but we'll work with that. And it's not so much that they couldn't get to camp. It's the hope and then the letdown.
Yeah.
And so we're looking towards a youth camp in replace of Extend, making it small so that it fits within all the parameters, using local resources so that I can cancel and get a refund off people that we have connection with. Like, it's all sort of kosher. But we talked about mission. And we thought the steps to getting to like Fiji for you, we're talking about India, is just so many hurdles and unlikely. I could take my youth group across the city and do cross-cultural mission.
Yeah.
More likely to happen. It's not exciting about going, getting a stamp on your passport, but that shouldn't be what it's about anyway. So quite an upper class area where I am ministering, we could go to a different area, different ethnic majority, different language spoken, and do just as effective mission, if not more effective, because we've got between mission trips we could have more connection. So that's where we're sort of looking. Not that we'll get a mission trip in next year, because not a rhythm of that yet. But that's where we're looking, is what serves our city, and what does mission look like more than just a one every 2 years trip. And especially lockdown or COVID has sort of forced us to look New Zealand wide. So that's where I'm setting my parameters that I'm looking at, if that's helpful, Dan.
Yeah, when we're still doing the Ruatoria, that's happening in a couple of weeks, and we're still doing like urban outreach stuff around Tauranga, and we're even connecting with other churches in Rotorua and Paeroa and stuff like that. So yeah, you're right about all those. Those keep going, but I'm talking about the big ones that have risk. Like, so that is it worth the risk?
What do you mean?
Alan's in risk management, right? Back in the day when you were a trader.
Yeah, mate. I think we need, for our young people to need that they need hope. But the rubber hits the road where we've got to lay some money down, say. And so campsites, for example, are going to be wanting higher deposits to lock in campsites, but we're going to be wanting to not pay higher deposits. And so we're going to need good negotiation skills there, I think, with camps, whether they're our own individual camps or Easter camps, How do we plan for Easter camp when literally 12 hours later, the whole thing could be cancelled the night before?
Yeah. Dan, I think the question that's worth exploring is just stewardship of teenagers' emotions.
Yeah.
And you're a local mission legend. So figure out a way to do something big next year that's different from what you're doing now. Yeah. And it's a pre-step. Like, don't plan on going to Fiji in 2022 if you're not a part of this, and do something different. So that it has an element of risk and newness to it.
You mean like going to Auckland?
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Come visit us.
No way, it's too dangerous up there. Yeah. Hey, I gotta go, but little inside scoop, the reason Extend didn't happen is because Sarah said, no, you can't use my church because she hates myrrh. That's the real...
Because she's stuck with cleaning up everything after you guys all leave.
Someone had to say it, and I had to throw her under the bus. It's your fault. And it's really sad, but that's all right.
That's so not no.
Hey guys, thank you very much. Please use anybody on this screen to bounce ideas off of. We're here to support each other. So contact me here or each other, anything.
And I got a ton of resources, and I got a whole team. So just hit me up. I'm happy to anything. Yep, whatever.
Right. Don't do this by yourself.
You, Daniel? Yeah. What church are you with?
I forgot. Bethlehem.
Oh yeah.
You guys say Glenina for a second.
I was about to say Glenina again.
It's been recorded.
Could you post
Bethlehem Baptist Church? Just think of where Jesus was born, and you look at me, and you're like, obviously. I'm gonna run.
Check on the Facebook page. People who weren't here today. Check it up on the
Cool.
With mine.
All right. Take care, everybody. See ya.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye bye.